We've spoken about truth, kind of led you on a bit of a wild goose chase, because I do believe that there is an overarching or meta truth. I do believe that there's an overarching or meta truth by which our world is structured. And this overarching or meta truth are the thoughts, beliefs, and opinions of white, straight men who are able-bodied, Christian, and English-speaking. So I do believe that there's this overarching or meta truth by which our world is structured. And these are the thoughts, beliefs, and opinions of white, straight men who are able-bodied, Christian, and English-speaking. And really what I talk about when I say overarching or meta truth, I'm talking about the ability to have access to power. And really what I'm talking about when we say access to power and nobody freak out, I'm talking about privilege. And really what I'm talking about privilege, to move all the politics away, because these are very political words, right? All I'm talking about is having your voice legitimized automatically. That's it. So, for all of these that you plug into, you're going to automatically have your voice legitimized within a space. For all of these that you don't plug into, you're going to find yourself working extra hard to have your voice legitimized within a space. Is this something that people can connect with? Now, why do I put this slide up? Firstly, and the critical point here, and I want everyone who is white in this room to listen very carefully to me, or white men in particular, white straight men in particular, this is not a criticism on you. This is not here to say you are the worst person. You are the reason why we're in the shit. You are Trump, right? This is not what this is. This is an exercise in awareness that we can say there's something happening, there's something at play, even within Standard Bank, that is giving legitimacy to certain voices, and other voices have to work extra hard to find that legitimacy. And it happens without us knowing, but we can feel it, right? What are some of our thoughts on this? Because I really, and if there are any white straight men who want to kind of say how they're feeling, please do, because I want you to know that this is not an attack on you. Oh, great, another conversation about how white people are the worst. No, this is not what that is. This is rather. I'm glad that we can still have a sense of humor about these things. It's important.
So I guess this is not only about white men.
It's not.
Anyone who can connect with a few of those.
Yeah. Yeah, but also, I mean, there's so many other things that we're going to say here. What about CIB and non-CIB, right? What about Rosebank and Sour Street or Pixley Street? There's so many things. So, for example, let's do the Rosebank Pixley, because it's here. If we plug into Rosebank, you're like, oh, Rosebank. Oh, you work in Rosebank. Cool. Your voice is automatic. So your voice is automatically legitimized. It's like, oh, well, you must know something. You know, you must be this. Great. So now take that example, that realness of it, and understand that it exists for all of these things and more. So if you've ever felt like you don't plug into the Rosebank one, and you felt that sense of like a little bit of exclusion, imagine what it's like for people who don't plug into many of these things. It compounds. What are some of our thoughts around this? It's very hot in this room. Hey? That's bad for speaking because people get sleepy. And that means I have to work much harder to keep you awake. So if we can get this a little bit cool, that'd be great. What are some of our thoughts? Is this rubbish? Is this something you can identify with? Is this controversial? Are you feeling attacked? Hey? Does no one want to say anything? Because if you seem like you're in support of this, then you are a radical. Yeah. Yeah. No one? Yeah. Right. Yeah. But we can, and just listen carefully, everyone, we can understand how when we start criticizing the white boys club, what that would bring up for somebody who is a white boy within the space, can we? Even though, again, this is we're putting into practice to you, how we can put this into practice. And how can we now put this into practice and say, sure, for a white young man, straight man with an R&B, and everyone's saying, boys club, this boy, and you kind of feeling there, can you imagine how attacked and isolated you must feel? Right? For this person, even though you're looking at him and saying, why are you freaking out? You're going to be good. But he's saying, I feel really attacked. How do we, these are the moments when we have to sit and say, all right, and that's why I said this is not an attack. This is just an exercise in awareness. What else?
So I guess it's exactly what you said, right? So I think it's a brilliant one, and it's a realistic one. So it's about not seeing it as being attacking, but realizing whether it's your fault or not, that is the privilege that you've got. It's about owning it and realizing it.
Good. Okay. So we get a very good point that we have to make. But let's quickly talk about white privilege, and then we'll kind of go into here. I think it's important. What I do best, everyone here today, I don't consider myself a thought leader. But what I am good at is taking difficult concepts and repackaging in a way that is bite-sized. So I use a lot of analogy, and I'd like to give you an analogy for future reference. Let's talk about white privilege. Whenever we bring up white privilege, a lot of white people get really defensive. And rightly so, right? And they'll say, every time you bring up white privilege, it feels like you just think that I was given everything just because I'm white. But I've worked hard, my parents worked hard, my grandparents, my great-grandparents worked hard, right? These are some of the defenses to the discussion around white privilege, and let's just unpack some of these. The way I see privilege is that travelator at the airport. You come off the plane and you walk like this, but really you're moving like that. That's all privilege is. So when we talk about white privilege, we're not saying that white people are lying on the travelator and it's just moving them, that they're not doing anything, they're given everything. No, you're walking on the travelator, you're working hard, but that hard work of your great-grandparents, your grandparents, your parents, has been allowed to amount and to grow just because you were white in this country. So I'll say that again. We're not saying you haven't worked hard, or your grandparents, or your great-grandparents, but what we are saying is that hard work has been allowed to accumulate and to grow because there's legislation in place that allowed that to. To say that people of color, particularly black men in this country, have not worked hard in the development of this country is a lie. But that hard work hasn't necessarily been allowed to amount to anything and grow. Right? So we're not criticizing you just given everything. No, you're working. But it's been allowed to accumulate and grow, allowing the experience to be a lot quicker. All right? So I'm on the travelator, walking like this, but I'm moving like this. What does somebody have to do who's next to me, who's not on the travelator, to keep up with me? Run. Who can identify with the experience of having to run in Standard Bank, working like you're feeling much harder, working much harder than a lot of people? Right. And it's not to say that white men don't feel like they're working hard. Remember, no, we're not saying that. We're not saying white people are just sitting there and just getting promotions and they're not putting in the long hours. No. But the experience of being in a space where you have to work to have your voice legitimized is emotionally taxing. More so than for me within the space, who has my voice automatically legitimized. So to answer the question here, the idea of, so what do we do? Because a lot of people say, well, Roy, do I feel white guilt now? Or do I feel straight guilt or male guilt? What am I supposed to do? I can't give up my land, even though that maybe we'll get to that point. Like, what do I do? Give up my land? It's like, yeah, I can't give up my masculinity. I can't give up my straightness. So what must I do? And to answer your question, this is what we ask. Well, this is what I think we should do. It's not about giving up your privilege. You can't give up your privilege. But what it is about is how can we repurpose it? How do you recognize that this is at play and create space where voices that you know are excluded automatically have an opportunity to speak out? That, for me, is repurposing privilege. That's the critical point that we need to start doing. Not to give up, right? Not to give up your privilege, but to say, all right, this is a position I hold. How can I repurpose it so I can bring more people into the table and that they can speak up? For me, that makes sense.